which is, I think a lot of us fail in the administrative end of it. Only a small percentage of professional wrestlers go on and be successful promoters, announcers, administrators in some way. Only a small, most of us just sort of fade.
Do you think that might, with what you're drawing from, the athletes that you have coming into wrestling now, maybe more of them have college educations, maybe more of them, I would think, from my observation, going way, well, to my beginning of seeing wrestling drew your big, bulky types who, that may have been their avenue to make a living and nothing else. And today, in your case, you're forced to get a command of the business end of things, especially the way you're doing it.
Yeah, this is the hard way. You know, for example, I can run all your equipment in that studio. I used to produce the world-class TV show. I booked the talent in there and produced the show. Sat in on all the post-editing. I can run all your equipment there. If somebody pulls a mobile up there to shoot matches out of arena, like the NWF, they film a lot of places we wrestle. Well, I don't go on to last, so what do I do for 3 hours? I don't sit in the dressing room, I go out and sit in the truck. I listen to camera calls, you know, I know how to produce. That's something that I would dare say, I don't know if I could name 3 other guys in professional wrestling that are actively wrestling. I'm not talking about those that have gone on to administration. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about those that are actively wrestling. I couldn't name 3 other guys that know how to produce, you know, and edit, and put together a show, and do all of that.
We're wrong for this, huh?
Yeah, we've been wrong.
Okay, good.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, I won't. I don't think you said anything there that's...
Yeah, I did.
You did?
Yeah, I don't think it's good that anybody knows that I produced that show.
Okay. All right.
You know, and I don't think it's good that anybody knows that I'm Frank Goodish.
Oh, well, that won't happen. I guess 15, 20 years you've been in the business, maybe longer.
15.
And what would you say, from what you've seen of what McMahon's done to wrestling to what you see the trend being now, do you like the direction pro wrestling is headed? Is pro wrestling as a whole healthy? And, you know, just what are your general...
I think that professional wrestling is more healthy today than it's ever been in the past. There's a lot of speculation on the part of some fans and some wrestlers who've been involved in professional wrestling for a number of years that it's not so healthy. If you were to ask me why is it so healthy today, I think I would begin by saying that we have a better quality of athlete. I think that's visibly noticeable to the people. They see that. Wrestlers are no longer identified as blonde and fat. In my own case, I spent 3 years with the Washington Redskins in 1969, 70, and 71. I was an All-American high school football player. I went to school on an athletic scholarship. Now, Bruiser Brody is not one of a kind in that respect. There are other guys in professional wrestling today that also were All-Americans in football or wrestling or their track or their competitive sport. They also have college degrees. They're also not blonde and fat. They're conditioned athletes. So I think that's the first reason why professional wrestling is alive and healthy, is the quality of people that make up the sport today. The second reason, I think, and probably the foremost reason, is that with the coming of cable TV, it gives everyone from coast to coast, all 235 million people, a chance to see wrestling throughout the whole United States. And you could either go further than that and go Europe, South Pacific, Japan. Our cable network stations in this country are carried around the world. So if you wrestle for the WWF or you wrestle for the NWA or World Class Wrestling out of Texas, those tapes are viewed in Italy, in Germany, in Australia, in Japan. So when you talk about the health of professional wrestling, I'd say the quality of athlete and, of course, the number of people that are looking at wrestling today.
You mentioned the big fish, small fish concept earlier. A lot of the small promotions have been knocked out of business. McMahon has probably been the most responsible for that more than anybody. Is that good? And look at the AWA. To me, it does not. It seems like a sinking ship right now. World class, same thing. UWF looked like it was going to be a major thing, and now it's kind of been eaten up. As a wrestler, as somebody who can see a broader view of it than most, even in your business, how do you see that? Is that good for wrestlers? Is it good for wrestling? Is it good for the product?
I think it is good. I think what we have is a shortage of talent. You know, in professional football, one of the things that makes that a great, great game is every year there's going to be a college draft. Every year there's a couple thousand new college football players that are ready and eager to come out and play professional football. And Major League Baseball, you have a similar situation. Every year you've got a graduating class in high school and you've got a graduating class in college. And these young men are eager and they want to get into Major League Baseball. In professional wrestling, in a lot of places throughout the country, high schools don't have wrestling teams. Some college teams don't have wrestling teams. So there is a void there. It's hard to say that every year there's going to be 2,000 qualified wrestlers just eager to get into the sport. There's not. Good wrestlers are hard to find.
Well, is there a little bit of a roadblock there, because going from college football to pro football is almost, if you have the talent, it's a natural flow. It's what's expected. It's what the individual most likely has as his goal from day one. In wrestling, there's quite a difference. And so it's not as standard for somebody to move out of the college ranks and want to get into pro wrestling. It's been done, but I would think the situation's a little bit different because they have to bargain for more than, matter of fact, all those holds that may have gotten them a collegiate championship. You do too much of that, and nobody wants to see it.
Right. One thing about being a collegiate wrestler or a high school wrestler, it doesn't necessarily qualify you to be a professional wrestler.
Right.
This is what you're talking about when you're talking about college football and college baseball. They're prepared to go into Major League Baseball. They're prepared to go into the NFL when they come out of college. They have had the training, they've got the fundamentals, got the physical tools. In professional wrestling, you can be a great, great college wrestler at 175 pounds. You can go to the Olympics and win the Olympics at 175 pounds.
No place for it.
I don't think there's a place to be a great pro at 175 pounds. That's not to in any way take away from the skill of the 175-pound Olympic champion. There's no doubt that he could hold his own against a lot, maybe a majority of professional wrestlers. But there comes a point when 175 pounds can't compete against 320 pounds day after day after week after week after month after year. It physically takes its toll on you. You've got to have the physical tools in professional wrestling above everything else. Without the physical tools, it's a short game for you.
You've had an exceptional career. For as good as you are, you could do it easier. Well, I don't know, maybe I'm not correct in that. When I say easier, I mean avoid the trips to the smaller towns where you're only wrestling 500, 700 people watching you, and presumably not making as much as you would be if every night it was a Madison Square Garden or a Coliseum or someplace like that. You choose this route. Is it more than just the Japanese contract?
Yeah, I think it is. First of all, I've wrestled in Madison Square Garden. I know that feeling. I wrestled in the Boston Gardens. I know that feeling. I wrestled in the Cow Palace in San Francisco. I know that feeling. I wrestled in the Forum in Los Angeles. I know that feeling. But to really know professional wrestling, you got to know where its beginning was. And the beginning for professional wrestling came maybe 40, 50 or more years ago, when the only entertainment that came to most towns, rural towns, was the carnival. The carnival came. And one of the big things that the carnival always had was the strong man that challenged anybody in the audience to a wrestling match. And if you could beat him, you won money. That was the origin of professional wrestling. From that it grew into Madison Square Garden type wrestling. But to really know professional wrestling, to really say that you're at the top of the sport, you've got to touch people outside of New York City. You've got to touch people outside of Los Angeles.
But the guys doing it for WWF can touch them by wrestling one night and their tape, or the fact that they're moving around the country, almost everywhere in this country.
I think that anybody who's looking at me right now could attest to the fact that you can watch all of the football you want on television, all the collegiate football, all of the professional football you want, and you enjoy it. But there's no feeling like sitting in those stands and rooting for your team and jumping up and down and having your emotion in it. You can't do that on TV. When people look at Bruiser Brody on TV, they don't get near as emotional as they do as when they're sitting there at ringside. So all these people in all these rural communities, if they don't have a chance to go out there and actually touch Bruiser Brody and see him in person, he's really not at the top of his business. He can only be at the top of his business when he reaches those in New York City, those in Waxahachie, Texas, those in Blueville, West Virginia, those in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. You can only be the top when all wrestling fans get to be in touch with you, and that can't be done just on TV.
Would you be willing to talk about, in your case it's especially different, how one night you're a fan favorite challenging for a title, and a few hundred or 1,000 miles away from here tomorrow, you could be everybody's most dreaded nightmare trying to beat their favorite. And that must be a weird thing to adjust from one day to the next. You're different people.
I don't think it's a hard adjustment problem after 15 years. In the beginning, if you would go somewhere and people would, let's say, choose you as the one they wanted to see beat, it might irritate you a little bit. After doing it for so many years, you find out that your business is in the ring and the fans' business is in the stands. And as a paying customer, he must have the right to choose who he wants to win.
You're making his mind up by how you portray yourself.
I don't think so. It seems strange that I might go to a real conservative small town like Salina, Kansas, and be so acceptable with a ponytail, when every father out there is hoping that his son doesn't have a ponytail. People's emotions and people's thinkings are deeper than just what they see on the outside. I think that people, when they make a judgment about somebody, I think it's because they either know something personal about him or they don't know anything about him. And in my case, when I go to some parts of the country, they've been watching me for so long, they know what's inside, so it's easy for them to like me. On the other hand, I'll go to another part of the country where they only see me a few times and they'll look and they'll say, this is the kind of guy that I'm not so sure about, so they make a different type of judgment about.
But if I haven't seen you before, if I see you on one night, you're forcing the issue, you're more aggressive than maybe any wrestler I've ever seen. On another night, you're letting the other guy be the aggressor for a little while and then responding, reacting to him. You're causing the action in one case, you're reacting in another.
Okay, first of all, I think that everybody who's looking at me right now should understand that Bruiser Brody never let anyone do anything to him. I don't know about the other professional wrestlers. I only know about Bruiser Brody. And when I go in the ring, it doesn't matter whether I'm in Texas or New York, or it doesn't matter whether people like me or dislike me, I'm going to be just as aggressive every night. Now, some nights it may look like I'm not aggressive. If I do this 30 nights in a row, sometimes these old legs, they don't go as good as they did 15 days ago. Sometimes physically, I don't feel good either. And sometimes my performance may not be what it was the night before. But when I do go in the ring, anybody who signs a contract to wrestle Bruiser Brody must know that he's going to be aggressive to the best of his ability.
Okay. I have one more thing. and that is you've been in the business a long time. You paid a physical price. It's obvious. Is it still worth it to you? And from what I hear, the older you get, the more you feel all the years that you put into it. I don't know that, but I've heard that. Is it going to be worth it to you at age 60, do you think, or 70, to have had the career you've had and to have done what you've done all this time?
Sure. As I look back at this point, I played 3 years in the NFL. I wish I could have played 15. At that particular time, when I was released by the Washington Redskins, the coaching staff and the administrators for the Redskins ball club thought that they had somebody who could do that job at that position better than I could do it. And that's the choice they made. So I went on into professional wrestling. As I look back over 15 years, I don't say, oh, I wish I would have spent 15 years in the NFL. Certainly I would have been grateful to have 15 years in the NFL. But I'm equally as grateful to spend 15 good years in professional wrestling. And I'm 37 today, and I think that I probably got 10 more good years left in professional wrestling. Now, if I had 15 and I had 10, I'm looking at maybe 20 or 25 years in professional wrestling. I don't think there's anybody, maybe George Blanda, who can say they spent more than 20 years in the NFL. So I'm very happy with the way fate has taken its course. I didn't ever guess that I was going to be a professional wrestler. Once I started in professional wrestling, learned sort of the ropes and the ins and outs. If I had it to do over again, I think that I would probably even pass up my 3 years in the NFL and devote them to wrestling because it has been that good to me.
You said something that makes me want to ask you one more thing, if you're willing to answer, and that is a lot of it seems a trend almost in pro wrestling. Bruno Sammartino had seems as glorious as a career as you could have. He got out of it, and then he's back on a given night wrestling for McMahon. In his case, he still puts out well. He still looks good, and he still wins. But there's other guys who were at the top, and instead of just walking away, I would think the money that they accumulated would have been enough to let them do that. They stay around and they become the guy who the people are starting out build their reputations on, and this guy becomes enough. And so all those kids that were watching this guy, and he was the greatest 10 years ago or whatever, and now he's just he's a preliminary wrestler, and he's not near what he was, and all his credibility, all that he built up through that career gets kind of tossed aside. Why do so many wrestlers choose to let that happen? Why don't they walk when they've hit the point where I can't do any more or I can't do it any better, and the promoter's going to use me in a way I don't want to be used?
That's a tough question, and I don't know whether this is the right answer. But in every professional sport and perhaps every business, if everybody who reached the top in whatever their business is bowed out at the top, that particular business would suffer as an industry. What you have is evolution, is what you're talking about, evolution of an athlete, evolution of a wrestler. The only way that new wrestlers starting today can ever reach the top is they must wrestle the guys on the top. So if all the guys on the top bowed out because they got a pocket full of money or for whatever reason, then the guys down here starting out would never have the opportunity to learn what those guys on top took 20 years to learn. I don't know whether I can go from wrestling main event back to wrestling in the first match. I got to say I admire the guys that can do that. I don't know whether I can do it. But I do know this, that if that day comes that I have to go back and wrestle in the first match and the second match, then it's my obligation, I guess you would say, to give back to professional wrestling and the new guys starting what wrestling gave to me, which was so good. Now, if I bowed out at the top and said goodbye to professional wrestling, and everybody else did that, I don't really know how the guys starting out would ever get to the top. They got to wrestle against the competition in the sport. So I think that it's no different than the guy who plays 5 or 6 years and he's an all-pro starting right guard for the Dallas Cowboys. And here comes a rookie into camp and he beats the guy out of a job. Now, they still need this guy who was an all-pro for 5 or 6 years to back up this new man. Well, if the guy who was all-pro, he just gave it up and said, well, I'm not staying with the Cowboys no longer because I'm not first string. I don't think the Cowboys could go on and be successful. They've got to have the experienced and seasoned ball players, the ones that have gone up here and are coming down here. And they've got to have a bunch of ball players that are just starting here. And it's the same in professional wrestling. So when I look at Bruno Sammartino or some of the other guys that people look at them and say, well, they're not like they were 10 years ago. Maybe they're not. But they're probably making a bigger contribution to wrestling today than they did back then.
That's a great answer. Is there anything you want to add while we're talking?
No, I'm happy to be here, and I don't care about all those other wrestlers. If they don't want to come to the small towns, the rural communities, that's okay. Bruiser Brody will always come, touch the people in every community from coast to coast.
Well, why don't you tell them who I am?
I forgot.
I'm going to tell you.
You forgot.
Sorry, I apologize.
His name, David Schultz, is Dr. D.
Why are you
Wrestling Antonio Inoco.
Why are you called Dr. D?
Why not?
Are you liked by the fans here?
I don't care what the fans like. I don't care what they do. I don't care what you do. I don't care what this guy holding the camera do. That guy just walked off. He can't even talk. You're here to try to make a fool out of me like everybody else.
Why would I make a fool out of you?
I don't know why you'd do it. You said you didn't know why you was here.
Well,
Go ahead, ask your questions.
Okay. You're right. I'm making a fool out of myself.
Yeah, you're making a fool out of yourself. You need
How's
to
the
us before you
business?
come down here. What?
Is this a good business?
Yeah, it's a good business. I wouldn't be in it if it wasn't.
Why is it a good business?
Because only the tough survive. That's the reason you ain't in it. And this punk holding the camera reading he ain't in it. Reading these rednecks out here ain't in it. Because it's a tough business.
That's terrific.
What? Is that all you got?
Is scheduled for one fall.